It was a stormy November night in Manhattan when Victoria Sinclair, heiress to a real estate empire worth billions, saw something that would change her heart forever. As she was returning from another meaningless business dinner on the Upper East Side to her penthouse on Fifth Avenue, she stopped dead in her tracks in the pouring rain. There he was, a man in his late 20s in a wheelchair, soaked and shivering under the awning of a closed Starbucks near Columbus Circle. His worn clothes contrasted sharply with the elegance of the neighborhood, but his eyes held a dignity that struck her like lightning. Victoria didn't know this man was Jake Morrison, a former software engineer who had lost everything after a car accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. She didn't know that the security guards at her own luxury hotel, the Sinclair Plaza, had thrown him out that very afternoon for not fitting the image. Hers, and she definitely didn't know that the two words she was about to speak, "Come with me," would unleash a love story that would challenge everything they both believed about social differences, true wealth, and the transformative power of authentic love. Victoria Sinclair stepped out of Le Bernardin, pulling her cashmere coat tighter as the November rain pounded the Manhattan streets. At 30, she had inherited the largest real estate empire on the East Coast, but that night she felt emptier than ever. She had just closed a $50 million deal over a dinner where she'd worn a fake smile for 3 hours straight. Her driver was waiting with the Bentley, but Victoria waved him off. She needed to walk, to breathe, to feel something real after another night of hollow conversations about ROI and market projections. She lived surrounded by luxury, but had forgotten when she'd last had a genuine conversation with anyone. As she walked down 6th Avenue toward her 5th Avenue penthouse, the storm intensified. She took shelter under the awning of a closed Starbucks near Columbus Circle. And that's when she saw him, a young man in a wheelchair, completely drenched, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and resignation. Jake Morrison was 28, and until 6 months ago had been a software engineer at a prestigious tech startup in Silicon Valley. The car accident that shattered his spine had also shattered his life as he knew it. His fiancée had left him. He'd lost his job due to constant medical absences, and that afternoon, the security at the Sinclair Plaza Hotel had thrown him out of the lobby where he'd sought shelter from the cold. Victoria studied the man in front of her. Despite the soaked clothes and precarious situation, there was something about him that immediately captivated her. His dark eyes had a depth that contrasted starkly with the empty gazes of the men in her social circle. He didn't look at her with the usual greed people showed when they recognized who she was, but with a mixture of curiosity and exhaustion. Jake recognized the woman immediately, Victoria Sinclair, the heiress whose hotel empire had just made him homeless. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him, but he was too exhausted to feel bitter. He just wanted to find a dry place for the night. The rain grew heavier, and the temperature dropped. Victoria looked toward her penthouse, its lit windows visible from where they stood, with its heated floors and fireplace. Then she looked at Jake, who was shivering despite trying to hide it. In that moment, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. The words came spontaneously, carried by a compassion she hadn't expected to feel. Jake stared at her in disbelief. For months he'd faced rejection, pity, and indifference. That the very woman whose empire represented everything he'd lost would offer him help was something his mind struggled to process. For a moment he considered refusing the offer. His pride, one of the few treasures he had left, rebelled against the idea of accepting charity. But the cold was merciless, and something in this woman's eyes told him her gesture wasn't born of pity, but of something deeper. Victoria pushed the wheelchair through Manhattan's wet streets, aware that each step took her further from her world of privilege and brought her closer to a reality she'd never imagined. Jake remained silent, lost in his own thoughts, as they both moved toward a future neither could foresee. When they reached Victoria's building on Fifth Avenue, the doorman looked at them with barely concealed astonishment. He'd never seen Miss Sinclair with someone like Jake. Victoria ignored his gaze and led Jake to the private elevator that went directly to her penthouse. As they rode up the 30 floors in silence, both knew something fundamental had changed in their lives. Victoria had broken all the rules of her world by bringing a stranger from the street home. Jake had accepted help from someone who represented everything he'd lost. Neither knew what would come next, but both felt it was the beginning of something extraordinary. Victoria's penthouse sprawled across 4,000 square feet of minimalist luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Central Park and the Manhattan skyline, while the interior design combined contemporary art with designer furniture. Jake observed everything with a mixture of awe and melancholy, remembering when he too had dreamed of living in a place like this. Victoria moved through her space with the ease of someone born into abundance, but for the first time in years, she was aware of the contrast. Seeing Jake in her living room, she realized how cold and empty her life really was. Everything was perfect, but nothing had soul. She made hot tea and offered him dry clothes that had belonged to her brother, who had died in a skiing accident in Aspen 2 years earlier. While Jake changed in the bathroom, Victoria was left alone with her thoughts. She didn't understand what had compelled her to bring a stranger to her home, but something about him had awakened a humanity she thought she'd lost. Jake returned dressed in clothes that fit him perfectly, as if fate had conspired for this moment. Sitting across from each other on the Italian leather sofa, they began to talk. At first, the exchanges were cautious, but gradually the barriers began to fall. Jake told his story without self-pity. He'd studied computer science at MIT, worked on projects that made technology accessible to underserved communities. The accident had happened on the FDR drive when a truck ran a red light. His life changed in seconds. Victoria listened, fascinated. She'd never met anyone who talked about their work with such passion, who had built something tangible that improved others' lives. Her own world was reduced to numbers on balance sheets and decisions that affected markets, but not real people. The conversation extended until dawn. Jake talked about his life before the accident, his dreams of creating a social tech company, how the system had abandoned him when he needed it most. Victoria shared her own golden prison, the loneliness of being seen only for her fortune, the constant pressure of maintaining an empire, the complete absence of authentic relationships. When the sun began filtering through the windows, both realized they'd shared more honesty in one night than in years of superficial relationships. Jake prepared to leave, grateful for the hospitality, but aware they belonged to different worlds. Victoria stopped him with a proposal that surprised even herself. Her company needed tech consultants to modernize their hotel systems. Jake had exactly the experience they needed. It wasn't charity, she insisted. It was a business opportunity that would benefit both. Jake looked at her skeptically. He knew it was a gesture of kindness disguised as a business opportunity, but he also recognized it was his first real chance to rebuild his professional life in months. His pride fought against his practical need. Victoria added that he could stay in the guest apartment while working on the project. It was a completely independent space in the same building, designed for executive guests. Jake would have his privacy, and she'd have peace of mind knowing she was helping someone who truly deserved it. The proposal hung in the air between them. Jake knew accepting meant crossing an invisible line between his old world and a completely new one. Victoria knew she was risking her reputation and breaking all the unwritten rules of her social class. But looking into each other's eyes, both understood that some opportunities only come once in a lifetime. Jake nodded slowly, sealing a deal that went far beyond business. Victoria smiled for the first time in months with genuine happiness. Neither of them knew this decision would lead them down a path that would transform not only their individual lives, but confront them with all their prejudices about love, social class, and what it really means to be rich in life. Jake's first days working for Sinclair Hotels exceeded all expectations. His innovative tech solutions revolutionized hotel operations. Victoria found herself visiting him daily, supposedly for work, actually fascinated by his passion. Both discovered surprising sides to each other. Behind Victoria's business facade hid a vulnerable, witty woman. Jake wasn't the broken man she'd expected, but brilliant and independent. Then came the storm night. Power outage throughout the building. Victoria appeared at Jake's door with candles and wine. In the flickering light, all masks fell. She confessed her loneliness. Men only wanted her money. He told her about his ex, who couldn't handle his wheelchair. When the lights returned, everything had changed. From employer and employee, they'd become two people in love. The question was, would their love be strong enough for what was coming? The news of Victoria Sinclair and Jake Morrison's relationship exploded across American media like a bomb. The heiress and the homeless. Love or pity? Fall of a dynasty. The headlines grew crueler by the day. Photos of Jake entering and leaving Victoria's building became fodder for cable news shows that dissected every aspect of their story. Victoria's family reacted with predictable horror. Her Uncle Charles, chairman of the board, called an emergency meeting where she was presented with an ultimatum: end the relationship immediately, or face a legal battle for control of the company. They reminded her she had responsibilities to thousands of employees and shareholders who couldn't afford her emotional whims. Jake faced his own personal hell. Social media comments were merciless, painting him as a gold digger who'd seduced a vulnerable woman. Former colleagues and acquaintances came out of nowhere to give malicious interviews about his supposed history of manipulation. The weight of media attention was crushing for someone who just wanted to rebuild his life privately. The pressure reached its peak when Victoria came to Jake's apartment one evening.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
And found him packing his belongings. He explained he'd decided to leave New York, to disappear until the media storm passed. He couldn't bear to see how his presence was destroying her life and reputation. Victoria stood paralyzed, watching the man she loved preparing to sacrifice his own happiness to protect her. In that moment, she understood she had to make the most important decision of her life. She could choose the safety of her known world, or fight for the only authentic relationship she'd ever had. Her response was to call a press conference for the next day. Jake tried to dissuade her, knowing that publicly confronting her critics would only intensify the scrutiny. But Victoria had made her decision with the same determination she'd used to expand the hotel empire. The press conference was a defining moment. Victoria, elegant and uncompromising, faced the media with an honesty that completely disarmed them. She didn't deny her relationship with Jake or apologize for it. Instead, she spoke of a man who had transformed not only her company's systems, but her understanding of what true value meant. She explained how Jake had revolutionized their hotel's operational efficiency, increasing both customer satisfaction and profit margins. But more importantly, she described a man of exceptional integrity who had helped her remember that business success without human purpose was completely empty. The journalists' questions became progressively more respectful as Victoria systematically dismantled every malicious insinuation. When someone suggested Jake was taking advantage of her wealth, she responded that, on the contrary, he had enriched her in ways money could never buy. Jake watched from his apartment, feeling a mixture of love, gratitude, and terror for the consequences this might have for her. Victoria was risking everything to defend him publicly. The reaction was immediate and divided. Part of American society rallied behind Victoria, seeing their relationship as an inspiring story that transcended social barriers. Another part condemned her for betraying her class and compromising the family legacy. But for Victoria and Jake, public opinion had become irrelevant. They had passed the trial by fire and emerged more united than ever. They knew they would face more challenges, but they also knew that together they could overcome anything. That night, As they dined in Victoria's penthouse surrounded by Manhattan's lights, both understood they had crossed a point of no return. They were no longer just two people in love. They were partners in a quiet revolution against the social expectations and prejudices that had defined their previous lives. 6 months after the press conference, Victoria and Jake's life had found a new equilibrium. The initial scandal had gradually faded, replaced by genuine curiosity about this unconventional couple that defied all established social norms. The relationship had weathered tests that would have destroyed less solid romances. Some members of Victoria's family had cut contact completely, while others had reluctantly come to respect her obvious happiness. Jake had lost some friendships that couldn't overcome their own prejudices about class differences, but gained the respect of colleagues who admired his professional integrity. Professionally, the partnership had been a resounding success. The tech systems Jake had implemented in the hotel chain had resulted in significant increases in both efficiency and customer satisfaction. More importantly, they had collaborated to create a foundation that provided technology training to people with disabilities, helping them reintegrate into the workforce. Victoria had discovered a passion for social work she never knew she had. Working alongside Jake at the foundation, she'd seen firsthand how technology could be a tool of empowerment for people society had written off. Her perspective on the purpose of wealth had fundamentally changed. Jake, for his part, had regained the self-confidence the accident had shattered. Working on meaningful projects, being valued for his expertise, and especially being loved for who he truly was, had healed wounds that went far beyond his physical disability. One spring evening, as they strolled through Central Park on one of their regular dates, Jake stopped by Bethesda Fountain. Victoria noticed he was nervous in a way she'd never seen before. With slightly trembling hands, he pulled a small box from his jacket. The proposal was simple, but profound. Jake told her she had saved his life that rainy night, but more importantly, she had given him back hope for the future. He asked her to marry him, not for convenience or security, but because he had found in her his true life partner. Victoria was speechless for the first time in months. Looking at this man who had completely transformed her understanding of love and purpose, the answer was obvious, but the implications were enormous. Marrying Jake would mean permanently sealing her break with certain sectors of American society. But it would also mean formalizing the most authentic and productive partnership of her life. Her answer was an immediate and unequivocal yes, followed by tears of joy that surprised them both with their intensity. The wedding took place 6 months later at the Sinclair family estate in the Hamptons, a property that had been in the family for generations. It was an intimate ceremony that reflected the values that had come to define their relationship: authenticity, inclusion, and celebration of differences. The guests included an eclectic mix of Manhattan high society, Jake's tech colleagues, foundation employees, and people with disabilities who had been helped by their programs. The diversity of attendees told the story of how two seemingly incompatible worlds could merge into something beautiful. During the ceremony, both Victoria and Jake spoke about how their love had been born, not despite their differences, but precisely because of them. Each had brought perspectives that had enriched the other in ways they never could have imagined possible. The celebration lasted until dawn, with music that mixed jazz standards with contemporary compositions, symbolizing the perfect fusion of tradition and innovation that had come to characterize their life together. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife under the Long Island stars, Victoria and Jake knew they had created something extraordinary. A partnership based on mutual respect, genuine admiration, and love that transcends any social or physical barrier. Their story had become an inspiration for others facing their own challenges with social expectations, proving that authentic love always finds a way to prevail. 2 years after their wedding, Victoria and Jake had built a life that exceeded their most ambitious dreams. Their foundation had become the leading organization in America for workplace integration of people with disabilities, with programs in 25 cities and plans for international expansion. The Sinclair hotel chain had undergone a complete transformation under their joint leadership. Jake had revolutionized not only the technological systems but also the corporate culture, implementing inclusion policies that had made the company a model for the entire industry. Victoria had found her true calling leading corporate social responsibility initiatives. Their apartment in Manhattan had become an informal salon where entrepreneurs, activists, artists, and engineers mixed. The dinners they hosted were famous for stimulating conversations and innovative projects that emerged from these unexpected connections. Jake had returned to teaching as a visiting professor at Columbia, teaching a course on inclusive technology that attracted students from across the country. His lectures were legendary, not only for the technical content, but for the life lessons he shared about resilience, adaptation, and the importance of never letting circumstances define possibilities. Victoria had begun writing a book on ethical business leadership, documenting the lessons learned during her company's transformation. Publishers from around the world competed for the rights, recognizing that her personal story gave unique credibility to her ideas about corporate responsibility. But the most important project came when they decided to adopt a child. After months of evaluations and interviews, they were selected to adopt Marcus, an 8-year-old boy with cerebral palsy who had spent years in the foster system without finding a permanent family. Marcus's arrival completed their family in a way neither had anticipated. The boy had faced his own series of medical and social challenges, but in the loving and adapted home Victoria and Jake had created, he began to flourish. His contagious joy and unwavering determination inspired them both in new ways. Watching Jake teach Marcus about adaptive technology, or Victoria helping him with homework, confirmed what both knew. They had created not just a family, but a model of what was possible when love transcended perceived limitations. One afternoon, as the three of them strolled through Central Park, at the same spot where Jake had proposed, Victoria reflected on the extraordinary journey they had traveled. From that rainy night when she'd seen a stranger at a coffee shop, to this perfect moment with her husband and son, her life had been transformed in ways she never could have imagined. Jake, watching Marcus play with other children in the playground, with the naturalness that characterizes all children when not limited by adult prejudices, thought about all the people whose lives they had touched along this journey. Every challenge had strengthened their relationship. Every victory had been shared. That evening, as they tucked Marcus into bed, and he thanked them for being his parents, both Victoria and Jake understood they had achieved something that goes far beyond personal success. They had proven that authentic love not only transforms the people involved, but creates ripple effects that touch countless lives. Their story had become legend in New York and beyond, not because it was a fairy tale, but because it was real, complex, and full of the genuine struggles all meaningful relationships face. They had proven that social, physical, or economic differences become irrelevant when two people commit completely to each other. Looking toward the future, Victoria and Jake knew they would continue facing challenges. The world hadn't completely changed, and prejudices and barriers still existed to be broken down. But they also knew that together, as a family, they had the power to continue creating the positive change they wanted to see in the world. Their love had begun with 2 simple words on a stormy night: "Come with me." Now, years later, those words had become an invitation to all those who believed in the transformative power of authentic love, proving that the deepest human connections often arise in the most unexpected moments. Like, if you believe love can overcome any social barrier, comment which moment of the story touched you most. Share to inspire those who believe in love that transcends differences. Subscribe for more stories of authentic love and overcoming. Sometimes it just takes stopping on a stormy night to find your destiny. Sometimes 2 words can change 2 lives forever. And sometimes the most beautiful love stories are born when we least expect them. Because true love doesn't see differences, but celebrates everything that makes us unique.